What an amazing moment this is. It's one of our first programs for mentorpreneurs, which we will talk about today. You've just seen the video introducing that, and we're delighted and honored to have some wonderful guests who are not just guests and participants in this process, but they have been anchor partners, and they've taken the risk with us. They sort of are coming on this journey with us in terms of building the ecosystem with startups, and then developing the whole environment as we go forward. And a lot of new ideas and fresh new things. And today we will have a panel discussion and include all of them. So let me start by introducing our panel. Neil Petch, an old dear friend who's been very helpful in working with us. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me again, Tariq, and lovely to see you all. Neil Petch, Chairman of Virtue Group, the holding company for Virtuzone. We've been helping people set up companies in the UAE since 2009. I believe we've set up nearly 12,000 companies now, so we've shared dreams and visions and the hopes and aspirations of thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs.
So you're ideally placed to be in this program. Also to mention that Neil is also a judge in the panel that we've got. So thank you for
absolute pleasure. Looking forward to
engaging your time. Ori, you're here from South Africa. You have a weird and wonderful background. Can you share about Scalable CFO? You're one of the founders. What is it, and what do you do?
Okay, well, the Scalable CFO actually is something that came about by accident. Initially, I sort of decided to leave the corporate world and wanted to do something a bit more entrepreneurial, a little bit, it spoke more to what I was interested in for a very long time. But of course, hadn't had a chance to. Having a finance background, it's quite demanding, audit and finance, so I really didn't have the time to put into anything that I thought was entrepreneurial. But during the time, that break, I met a lady who invited me to help her with her finances, and she was setting up a business. In fact, she's a serial entrepreneur. She'd been around, has started businesses and gone through failures and successes, and essentially supported her through this journey. And through that process, I realized that this is something that actually has a bit of merit, especially here, where there's a lot of finding really meaningful connections with finance professionals, at least for SMEs, is something that's a little bit challenging. People don't necessarily know where to go. There's a lot of accountants, but how do you find someone who'll sit with you and show you how it's done and what you need to do and what you need to think about when you're starting a business. So this is how the Scalable CFO was born, and I am very lucky to have two people that have decided to come along on this crazy journey, and
mad journey.
Mad journey.
That's a wonderful story, and I think this is where a lot of the ideas come together. And what we're doing today is really to really go below the surface, under the skin, and understand what drives an entrepreneur, what drives a startup. And you obviously are a living example of that. The second thing which I like to mention, and one of the reasons why we took a financial, because we're mad, we're crazy, we're eccentric, so we're allowed to do these kinds of things. We could have had a KPMG sitting there, we could have had an Ernst & Young, because they're friends of ours. But I thought that we wanted to have somebody who is actually in business and is a startup. Because then you can relate and you can participate, and this becomes part of your success journey. And I think that is where the alignment came together. Linda.
Well, so my background is very typical of a Chinese family in the UK. So my parents ran a Chinese takeaway. So naturally, I was born into that environment, and I actually see how important it is to have that financial savviness or understanding of what goes behind a business. And through that, just understanding, I understand how hard it is for startup to be aware of this, and talking to friends, you just gauge how how frightened they are of numbers, and we're constantly saying, look, if you can read a book with words, why can't you read your story by numbers? So this is how we come about.
Yeah.
It's actually very interesting because running a real business, and I think a takeaway business is a real business. You're churning cash every day and you're managing that. I think you would bring some of those things to this the whole ecosystem, and I really appreciate that.
And we try to make finance fun as well.
Yeah.
How do you make it fun? I mean, when you have brackets around your numbers, how are you making it fun?
Well, for a start, it's your business model, so you must be excited by that to begin with. And by being able to translate that into numbers, you can start seeing, how, one mechanism affects another. And just by being able to understand what each line, how it represents your story, you can start by adding adjectives to it. How can I increase this side, or maybe add more things, or I don't know, branch it out, and then this will then filter down to the bottom line. That's how creative comes, and then it makes you see, actually this doesn't actually work financially. I need to get more creative to make, if I want this number at the end of the day, what can I play with? What are my parts? How can I mold it?
Yeah, fair enough. And our last guest is Samar. Samar has been working with us and helping us through a lot of our processes over the last 6 to 9 months. So she's almost an integral, she is an integral part of our team. I was saying almost, sorry. She is a consultant with Roland Berger, which is a top consulting firm. Why don't you say more, Samar?
Before I actually start into this, I absolutely love my project that I had with MAD Talks. And before I got into the project, I had heard about Tariq being, a little bit crazy and stuff. But when I worked with him for about 6 months on the project, I realized that he's absolutely mad. So everything that we do over here is absolutely making a difference. I am working with Roland Berger as a consultant, and at the same time, I'm also managing Dubai Angel Investors, which is interesting in a way that it's a startup itself, but at the same time, we are investing into other startups. So it has a perspective of both sides, and that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past 1.5 years now.
Super. So now we've got all our guests in place. In the finance space, everybody's almost an entrepreneur. You're the only non-entrepreneur here.
I need to get into that through MAD, I guess.
You're the boring consultant. But we need some smart people who will tell me what to do.
That's actually boring for a change.
See, we're making it fun already.
Now, you saw the introduction for Mentorpreneurs, and I know it's a little bit of a mouthful, but we were trying to capture 2 ideas. One is entrepreneurship in startups, and the other is the mentoring concept, and we have this sort of fit somehow. Neil, you've seen that. You've seen some of the things that I talk about in terms of reverse mentoring and so on. What excited Virtuzone and your team to be a part of this development process? What does it mean to you, really?
Well, personally, I was lucky enough to have my son working with me, and that really puts you on the spot and means that you have to perform, doesn't it? And he was working on a specific project for us, and it was, as a father, I was immensely proud to see that he was genuinely bringing things that we hadn't thought of, and then I wanted to apply that to our organisation, so one of the things that if you were to Google reverse mentoring, then you're going to pick up the classics, but they're classics because it's true. The energy that you get from youth, the exposure to technology. You're probably all much more technologically savvy than I am, but the thing that I really saw and which we wanted to apply is that when you analyse an aspect of your business, very often, of course, you're an expert in it, but the consumer that you're seeking to target isn't an expert. They look at things through different eyes. So, for example, we were looking at Google AdWords and search engine optimization and how people would discover Virtuzone on the web. So I would put in a search because that's my business. It might not be the same search that a consumer who is setting up a new business manufacturing cuddly toys, they're brilliant in their sector. They don't know that a company license is required. They just know they want to start their business. So it's getting a different perspective, which we found was enormously useful.
Now, both of you ladies together, I can ask this question. You started talking to Alexandra, who is so shy. She's a real star in this thing. She's put it all together, and she's now somewhere there. And that is actually part of her strength. She's the quiet, hardworking person who builds things, and she's one of our builders. You met her, you spoke to her. Can you take us through that journey? What inspired you to be part of this? Why are you engaged with us, with Mentorpreneurs?
First of all, I think it was a huge honor and a pleasure just to actually get, her reach out to us and want us to be a part of this. And personally, the whole initiative resonated with me because one of the things that I've noticed, and I think we've made these comments, or we've spoken about this before amongst us, how a lot of the incubation programs and the ones or acceleration programs tend to be very compact, and they bring you in and you have to get everything done, and to be quite honest, realistically, there's not a lot that you can really get. You can't really get as much as you would like out of a short situation, especially if you put in with a group of other people. And what I liked about it is that the fact that actually it's a 12-month program. It means that you actually committed to making sure that the startups are sustainable and they come out of there with something that's actually tangible. So that was the most appealing part. And I think we always we are already on a mission to give back in terms of or to support the ecosystem with financial education. It's in fact one of our big strategies and our big missions. So it completely resonated.
Samar, you've seen us develop all of these things. You've seen it from the inside. So what are your thoughts as you sort of see this thing sort of shaping, and what do you feel?
What I feel is that when I was actually introduced to Tariq about 6-7 months back, I remember you gave one of these talks where you actually talked about reverse mentoring. And for me, I was wondering when I was listening to you, how apt it is actually in our lives. Like it actually happens where we learn from youngsters, and we have actually no idea, but you actually gave a name to the thing that I was already experiencing in my life. We all are experiencing one way or the other. So I'm very close to my nephew who's just 16-year-old, and he has actually taught me a lot of things technologically wise. So I believe that a lot of analytical, technological things that I've learned from him, I would not have learned otherwise. So I believe that it's something which is already there, and there's actually a need in the market so that we can brand it in a way and actually bring people over so they can actually come with us and see what the value is in the whole process. And as a matter of fact, I believe that a lot of this is actually adopted in the investing side as well. Now that we're working with Dubai Angel Investor, we have like a lot of youngsters who are coming up with their startups, 18, 20 plus. And then we have investors who are 40 plus, and they combine together and they work on ideas together. So it's a two-way traffic where in 360 view, both of them are actually getting educated by each other. Both of them are actually learning from each other. So I think it's a very practical approach.
When I was creating this whole idea, I have a convoluted mind, so we came out with this little mix. I wanted to share with you guys. Does it actually make sense? Because we want it to be different and fresh. Because there's so many pitching competitions going on. It's the flavor of the month, and every month there's something new and the big prizes and so on. And we're not a rich company, so we needed to do it in a way that is fresh and creative. So you guys are coming on, you're providing us services for 12 months. Now that is an extensive investment, but I wanted that sort of thing to happen, to be something different. So that was the first reason. The second thing was that we've seen the Shark Tanks and the Dragon's Dens, so we've done that. What I actually found very interesting was looking at The Voice, where you can actually select each other, so to speak. So you sing for your company, and then one of the judges turns around and says, I want you, and I'll coach you, and in this case I want you, but the winner is coaching you. So you will actually be selecting amongst the winners to be your reverse mentor. So I wanted to play on that, which is so counterintuitive and so on, and then just build this whole idea of bridges between the different generations and empowering them. So it sounds a bit convoluted, but what are your thoughts, and anybody? I mean, and how do you feel that we can make this succeed?
I actually disagree with what you're saying. I think I think it's completely the opposite in that it's actually the natural way of thinking. Like what you're taking is a system or a process that's been done in a certain way to sensationalize the whole process. But the truth is, it's actually natural to want to have this respectful and almost like a sharing element, to bring it to this whole ecosystem supporting startups and competitions, because sometimes it's not about who wins at the end of the day, because the competition, people win, and then the next day the startup doesn't
and that's precisely why we didn't want one winner. Initially I wanted even 10 or more, and then we because of resources and so on, we said we'll work with 5. I didn't want one winner, because it just becomes there's one star and everybody else is forgotten.
And also people then end up not being focusing on the wrong thing. They get nervous because now you only have one chance. But the truth is, not everybody thrives under that kind of environment or pressure. So if you provide a fair platform, people get to know each other, get comfortable with each other, then actually you enabling the startups to actually shine and thrive.
Samar, we've got a week to go. How many of your DIE people haven't applied for this, or are they just looking for big, large chunks of money that you keep signing?
I think it's something that we need to create a little bit more awareness of, and I'm sure that we will be able to get at least out of the 13 IC members that we have, at least half of them would definitely jump on something like this. You're friends with most of them, so I'm sure you are more aware than I am on this. So, yeah.
So what we want to do now is really to, and this is the first program, and we just wanted to, what are the 2-3 things we should be doing and promoting out there? We still have about a week, 9 days to go for the closing date. So any thoughts of what we should be doing now? Because we have a couple of 100 applicants, of which I would say 10-15 are good. But again, we didn't have all the financial resources to go out there and do massive marketing and so on. So we've been doing very sort of targeted LinkedIn and Facebook approaches, and through a lot of our partners and support people. So a couple of ideas that we should be doing between now and say the 13th when it closes. Neil, what would you suggest?
I mean, we certainly we develop a lot of content of which this is part, and I think that this is ideal positioning for Virtuzone. Obviously, we've got a lot of entrepreneurs that have children that would like to be on that side, and so I'd be very keen to get behind this and send out to our database the fact that this is going on, and they're running out of time, so they better make that little video of themselves quickly, and actually, what better time? We're in the middle of the summer, so those of us that are here, you can drive to work a little bit faster and have a bit of time to be mad.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think getting those videos together and a simple application is what it's all about. But I'd like to have enough numbers and enough representation for this thing to actually succeed.
I would suggest that for us, since we are already here, we should actually act as ambassadors for this program and get as many people on board as possible.
Thank you very much. So, ambassadors, your resources in terms of an outreach. And perhaps the same with you.
So that's a challenge then. Who's going to get the most?
Most likely. Yeah. Make it successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Everybody just measures everything through likes.
How many followers do you have?
I'm not on Instagram. You guys are going to destroy me.
We believe in quality.
Yeah.
So welcome back to MAD Mentorpreneurs. We've just took a short break, and we've been looking at some amazing nuggets from people that we have touched in the past, and we'll be showing some of those throughout this program. Little nuggets of people who were hopeless, and then built from themselves from there. What we'd like to do now is to get to the second phase of our project and bring Neil in as the main participant on this segment. Neil, like you said, 12,000 companies you set up the whole baseline in terms of how organizations, young startups are being set up. Can you share with us, one, why did you get into that space, and what has been your story over the last 8 years since you've had it?
Yeah, I think it started, I like you, was in the media world, knew very little about helping people set up companies initially, and our business is about providing a great service, and we actually compete, I suppose you could say, with the government. There are 44 free zones in the UAE, and the consumer can choose any of those. So we've got to set ourselves apart. We've got to provide a higher level of service. We've got to be more efficient in our communication. And so those are the starting points. But then very quickly we realized, I remember after a year of being in business, that I think it was 22% of the companies that had set up with us were not renewing, and I thought, are they going to my competition? What's happening? And of course, because we target startups, we target 1-2-man operations. Year one is when times are most tough, when the revenue isn't yet coming in and the costs are high, and you're having to, whether it be rent an office or whatever. So we realized very rapidly, I'd love to claim to be the Archangel Gabriel here, but this was and the wonderful thing about when you can perform a good deed and it comes back and helps you. So I'd like to think that we realized we needed to provide an ecosystem that was supportive, that was conducive, that helped entrepreneurs, because so many people, you're saying that the two of you have arrived from different parts of the world, brilliantly skilled in moving an abacus around, but perhaps, for example, having absolutely no idea where to get the logo of your company designed, or any range of services, actually, which I would include accounting. So it was up to us to go and find these services, go and negotiate on behalf of the thousands of people that we represent, and find the very best services, get good prices for them, so that if you were coming in and setting up with us, you don't need to choose to use them, but if you wish to, we've spent the time locating them, and we've negotiated on your behalf.
So let me press you on that. Are people actually using your services, or is it just a nice PR exercise?
No, very, very much so, because again, we are targeting people who choose what they want to do is utilize their money to spend on their staff and on their marketing, rather than, for example, on a swanky office and these other things. So those people don't have the luxury of a reception, let alone a receptionist. They don't have the luxury of an accountant, so they need to find a solution. Actually, part of our role is educating them. I made this mistake myself. I thought that auditing was something that you did when you wanted to sell your company, so I'll do that a couple of years later, and once you start playing catch up, it's incredibly difficult to get everything right. So I made those mistakes myself. So no, it's educating people to get them to start contributing a small amount of their resource towards these things, and then putting people together. So for example, a bank is more likely to advance money to a company if that company is demonstrating that it's doing things correctly. So if our by partnering with a bank, by partnering with an auditing firm, putting the two together at events, then you reach that tipping point where things succeed faster, and where, of course, like-minded individuals can listen to others who've enjoyed a success story, who've raised money to advance their company to the next point. So they're inspired to do that.
You're on the other side of the equation in terms of actually as entrepreneurs yourselves and people who come to you to set up with companies like Virtuzone. What is your experience in terms of how easy is it, how expensive is it? Because the whole work environment is now completely different, and we're working from home, we're working from shared offices, we're working from Starbucks. All of these shifts are taking place. How do you feel companies like Virtuzone providing this platform and ecosystem? Would you apply? Would you work with it?
I think it's you know, there's one thing we're starting to realize, or that we are seeing a lot of, is that a lot of companies, like, they don't know what they need. They actually don't even know that they need to have a logo. So there's like an awareness level that needs to...
Is it really that bad? I mean, people have become so much more aware now because we have so much access to... I mean, if people don't know that they require a logo, I mean, would they really work the company? I mean, I'm serious about this because that's really, selling fruit and vegetables. And I think haven't we moved forward from there?
I think there's still a lot of, there's a lot of education to be done. It doesn't stop because I think when you're starting a business, there's so much happening at the same time. I don't think people don't know because it's deliberate. But in some cases, they just don't have the time to really pay attention to some of these aspects, and having these sort of active efforts to support the ecosystem, I think, is really necessary, because we see it all the time with our clients, even when they don't. We tell them something that they didn't think about before. They're entering into a whole industry, but they don't know certain things. So. And even as small as something like how important the branding of your business is, and there's a lot of things that sort of don't, unless you are sort of you I guess lucky enough to have had a mentor or had exposure or somebody shed some light. It just doesn't. It's not always known to people.
So can I enroll you into this conversation by? You've seen both as a consultant, there are lots of companies coming in, but much more at the Dubai Angel Investors, these young companies. What's missing when they come in and start pitching for you? What are they lacking? Where's the gap? So, people like Neil and others would be able to sort of plug those gaps. What are those gaps?
I think I'm going to agree with what you just said right now. A lot of times entrepreneurs do not even focus and they do not even know what's out there and what they actually need. So sometimes when we have these mentoring programs where the investor actually comes in and then they tell them what is missing, I think it's a little too late because they've already dropped the ball. Once you come to the investor, you should be prepared enough that you should have all the things covered before actually coming in. So I think for me, the gap that I see and the need that I think Neil or Virtuzone can actually fulfill is before the company actually come and stand in front of the investor and talk about, hey, I need this much amount of money. They should have been through some expert, and they should have done all the maybe a checklist or something which tells them what is it that's missing already, so that they come in much more prepared and the chances of actually getting an investment is much more higher for them.
Fair comment. So now there are a lot of these workspaces and incubators. You have Turn8, you have Astrolabs, you've got loads and loads of these places, Impact Hub and various others, In5 here. It's almost literally you set up a free zone and you set up an incubator. Now, if there's so much space available, Neil, how does that fit in with your business model, and how does that affect you?
Well, I think incubator is one of those marketing words that people have latched onto, and in many cases there are some great examples out there, but there are also a lot of companies whose business plan is actually to sell office space. So if you as an entrepreneur want to go somewhere, you need to think very, very carefully and not just see incubator and go, oh, fantastic. And I mean, you know, we again, I mentioned learning from our mistakes, and a classic mistake that one makes in business is to put off the task that you're least able to do.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still totally guilty of that. And then the second one, when you're recruiting, when you're expanding, is that you recruit people in your image, because hopefully you like yourself. Whereas what you actually need to do is recruit people that complement you and that have different strengths. So
I go one stage further. I actually recruit people often who irritate me. Because by definition they're doing things right, like, you know, has this been done? Has this been followed through and stuff? You know, that kind of thing.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you. Now I know it.
So when you know you're thinking about the things that you need, it's perhaps not automatic, it's not natural, and you know, yes, the logo was perhaps an exaggerated example, but it's amazing how many simple steps are not picked up on. And obviously what you want is you want to engage with a company that has a long-term strategy, just as our program is a 12-month program. There are many organizations who, in my particular industry, who their business plan is to make their consulting fee from you in one chunk, and then they don't expect to see you again. We have deliberately set ourselves up such that in many cases when someone's starting with us, we're losing money. Obviously we're doing that for a reason, and that's actually twofold. One, it is to support the market and help startups that otherwise would not occur. I think the UAE is amazing for that. The very fact that you know, we're a startup person is receiving 40% more money to go into their company because they're not being taxed than would be the case in Europe or whatever. So there's that great support level. We try and add to that. We work with a number of government organisations, so we are helping people get started and subsidising that cost. And then the way that it obviously works is we form a long-term relationship with that company. It's totally in our interests that that company grows and succeeds and asks for more visas and so on, which is our bread and butter. But the great thing is it's forcing us to be righteous, to look for the right things.
Let me go back to the Mentorpreneurs program itself. We'll bring it down to 20 people, and these 20 people will go into boot camps on communication and marketing, on legal and financial, and on leadership and sort of team building and team development. So those are the 2 or 3 core boot camps that we've got. And that is just to get all of those 20 people up to scratch. So that's the first phase. Then we'll come down to a semi-final stage, which is 10 people, and then they will, and that's towards the 23rd of September, and then the finals on the 30th of September, where there will be 5 winners. Now, I say 5 winners. I'd rather have all 10 of them in there, and but these 5 will be tracked. One of the qualifications is that if they miss more than 1 appointment, they're out. They're gone. They lose all of their services, and the next one clicks in, because that means that they're not serious and they're not sustaining themselves. So if I'm one of the winners and you've done 2 sessions with them and you've provided some services, and the third one they don't turn up, and you give them 1 warning, that in literally 1 strike, next one you're out, because you're actually taking somebody else's space, which means you're not really well engaged in the way. And if you're not providing good services, then it's incumbent on us to improve that. And we will constantly look at ourselves. But I think that's part of the process I'd like to click in, is that these 5 to 10 companies, I'd love to see how many of them survive the 12 months. Because I don't think all of them will. But it'll be a nice case study in terms of seeing how they evolve. And the idea of video and stuff to us is actually quite interesting, because we will track their story every sort of few months and how they've evolved, and then interview them on day 1 and then day 90 and then day 120 just to sort of see how they are connecting. Any thoughts, any ideas in terms of how we can improve this process? It's still an open discussion, and in typical millennial and startup style, we'll figure it out as we go along. Any thoughts? Any ideas?
I think it's about achieving that tipping point. What I like about this is the combination of mentoring and reverse mentoring, and people listen. Everyone has an agenda in life. The 5 to 10, excuse me, professional, the winners of this have their own ambitions as well. But it's about motivating one another. We agreed earlier that we as ambassadors and ambassadresses are going to go out there and get some really good studies. That's pushing ourselves forward, which I think is very important.
One of the things you did, which I found very interesting, is that when people start out, they need a laptop, they need a phone, they need bits and pieces. So you've got several deals structured where the CapEx has been converted into OpEx, and it becomes a bit more workable and palatable. Can you share a bit more?
Yeah, we've partnered with Etisalat such that, as you probably know, when you want to get equipment for your business, it's a very large expense, and B, if you don't have the licensing in place, and sometimes it's actually impossible to do that other than to go in and buy it yourself with cold hard cash. So our business is all about trying to make everything as seamless and as speedy as possible to allow you to focus on your business rather than all the admin behind it. So Etisalat have really got behind us on this, such that you'll be able to firstly get whether it be Apple or Samsung or whatever, so world leading products at a price that beats you or I walking into the various shops in the mall, and you'll be able to finance it as you say. And the key to that, I think, finance can sometimes get a bad name from people, but as a startup, I would, if you say what should I focus on, I would say that in the majority of cases, it's your staff and it's your marketing, getting the message out, and the more that you're able to focus on those two things, knowing that your accounts is in a safe pair of hands, for example, the better. So yes, exactly as you say, paying for your smartphones and your computers and so on, perhaps having slightly better technology than if you were forced to do it yourself. And we all know how demotivating it is using an old computer that crashes all the time. So you're giving your staff something that motivates them. You're allowing yourself to focus your budget on those areas that you think are most important. So it's a win-win.
So let's say one of these last final 10 people want to come to Virtuzone and they have a great idea. How much do we have to put out there to start? Because some of them may just come with an idea rather than actually a working business. Because we get figures from 100,000 to 10,000, and I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. But what are the one or two, three steps that one has to take to, and how much does it actually cost for a company to just get going?
Yeah, well, the actual cost of running a business, in almost all cases, it's the hidden costs that you need to worry about, but you put all your attention on the headline number. There's, in our case, we offer a huge variety of different licenses from different free zones and also onshore solutions for those that require it. So, it really does have a great variety. But the key thing here to this particular audience, I would say, is that you can get started for 500 dirhams. Now, the key thing here is that by allowing people to get rolling for 500 dirhams with monthly payments following on from that, is that you are potentially opening up the market to someone who hasn't thought through their business plan, their P&L. So we have a responsibility to try and make sure that that those ideas are correct, and that's the advantage of having been in this market since 2009. You get to be quite good at recognizing those ideas and that are great, those people that can execute those ideas, sometimes steering someone away from something that might give you short-term benefit, but knowing that they're going to tell their circle of friends that they got some decent advice.
A lot of people in this particular program actually have been applying from abroad, and that builds another layer of complexity to actually come in, set up, get a visa, get this thing going, because several people actually, they applied and they reached out to me on LinkedIn and saying, we're coming just for this program and we look forward to seeing you and see how we can bring our stuff here. Now, these are working companies, so I don't think they'll have those kinds of issues. But I think it'd be a very interesting bridge as the conversation on the Mentorpreneurs program is going on.
Absolutely. I mean, the UAE wants the brightest minds in the world, doesn't it? It wants to keep the ones that we've got here and bring really bright people from all over the world. It has a great foundation. It has a reputation for safety. I believe it does have a reputation for supporting entrepreneurism as well. So we want to take advantage of that. And from our side, that's making sure that our processes make it as easy as possible for someone sitting in Hong Kong or Delhi, that they can get the ball rolling without actually having to fill out loads of paperwork and get on a plane and so on. So we are going to be launching a product that facilitates that, and it's our dream that someone could be sitting in London, going into our office in London, having the blood test, perhaps taking a picture of their iris at that stage, and then all the paperwork being ready. So maybe we can watch this space.
Yeah, absolutely, brilliant. I'm looking forward to that. So that helps us to establish the fact that we have enough facilities through Virtuzone and others for entrepreneurs and for startups to actually get going fairly quickly. So no more excuses is basically what I would say. And we're constantly complaining, oh, it's too expensive and it's this and it's that. And I think where we are getting to now is with WordPress, with YouTube, with SoundCloud, with setups like that, with telecoms companies coming in and giving you some space and giving you a lift off. Things are getting better for startups and as we go forward into the future. And so thank you very much for that. I think we've understood how the basic thing works, and we'll go to a break. We're in the final segment of our session today, and we're going to talk about is looking at startups and get our experts to give us some bits of quick advice and see how we can wrap this up into some ideas for them to learn. So, Neil, if you were an entrepreneur today, and what advice would you give to your 19-year-old self?
Don't jump. Have a deep breath. Write it down on paper. I can't write. My writing's absolutely appalling, but I really admire those people that. If we could see the wall behind us now, you'd know what I'm talking about. So write it down, see if it makes sense, and speak to your peers. Speak to, try and get in and speak to your father's friends who are in business. You'd be amazed at the resources that you have to hand if you go and ask for it and go and get it. And I think that the millennials have amazing energy and knowledge of technology, as we were saying. There is also, sorry to sound like the grumpy old man, but there's an aspect of things being provided on a silver platter. and those people that don't just wait for it, but that go out and get it and use their ingenuity and initiative to find it, are the ones that will thrive.
Same question to you. What would you tell your 19-year-old self? It's only about 3 years
Yeah.
ago, but
Thank you for the compliment. I would tell myself not to worry too much, because I think that you try to make sense of everything, and I think sometimes we tend to be very hard on ourselves, and I certainly was, where I felt that maybe by pursuing a career in finance, I was betraying my creative side, and I think after some time you realize that things start to fall together and they come into place, and you start to figure out ways in which you can take those things that you enjoy and make them work for you. So and I guess don't be afraid to challenge yourself, because one of the things that especially being an introvert who's mistaken to be an extrovert, things are always a bit of a challenge. Like you have to put yourself in the firing line in order to be able to move forward. So anything that you're not comfortable with is actually a good thing, and now I realize that as much as we know that there's fear for something new or to do something that you're not comfortable with, it's not. It actually has a positive at the end of it. And actually something that someone told me a few months ago, something that I learned that's new, and I think it's sort of in line with the theme of mentorship, is don't think of people as mentors, or rather the concept is a little bit not to say old, but it's something that it's definitely due for disruption, like reverse mentorship. So rather think of instead of looking for mentors, rather create a personal board of directors, people that you can tap into or reach out to whenever you need something, and they don't necessarily need to know that they're your mentor, but you keep regular contact. And
it's interesting you talk about board of directors. We have a normal advisory board of directors, and we've got some very interesting senior people there. But we also have a millennial board, and we are sort of filling it up now. And then we'll have a bucket of reverse mentors below the age of 25. So we'll have these 3 buckets, all cross-fertilizing. So if Neil feels a little bit lonely and he wants either a millennial board member or the other bucket, you can dip in. And seriously, I go to and I present at events and so on, and I talk about reverse mentoring, and they don't know where to start, and they end up with their children or their employees. And I feel both of them are fine, that neither of them really count. You need an independent person to actually be able to speak to you, and you need that little coalition going in a very honest way that let them explain to you and go there as your mentor, and you should have the humility to become a mentee. Linda, you're a nice Chinese girl, Chinese and Indians, you've got to have triple degrees and do a real job in a real brand. What the hell are you doing this thing?
Actually,
your parents must be scared.
No, my parents never had the privilege of having a proper education, so they're very much free thinkers, and they believe in you do what you find your own path, and they total complete support.
Sound wonderful parents.
Yes, very open-minded. The advice I would give my younger self really is there is no right time. Sometimes you just need to believe in what you want to do and just go through it. But at the same time, don't be afraid to talk to other people as well, because you're so kind of scared that you might fail and you start overthinking things, and yet you don't want to be perceived as a failure, and that stops you from doing things. So don't be afraid to talk to other people, and the wealth of information that's out there, it can lead you down a whole new different path. Yeah.
Super, thank you. You don't have to go back too far, but what's the advice you're going to give to yourself now?
As of right now, I think I'm the only one who's not an entrepreneur over here. So again, I would give this advice to myself to not overthink, because sometimes we're just overthinking, and that's the reason why we're delaying our decisions. So whenever you feel that, life is happening right now, so if you feel that you have a good idea and you have a good prospect for something, just go ahead for it. Just jump into it.
May I ask a follow-on question? Why aren't you an entrepreneur? Are you scared of risk? Are you scared of failure? Are you too spoiled? Do you earn too much money? What are the reasons?
All of the above.
There you go.
So, no, actually, I think it's about the fear. And as Linda just mentioned, sometimes we're just waiting for the right time. And we just believe it's not there. But sometimes you just have to deep dive. And then you have to face the challenges and come out of it. So I think it's being more risk averse that has kept me from getting into something like this. But after working with you for 6 months, I'm definitely going to get into this. If not right now, at least in the next 6 months, that's what I'm looking into.
Have inspired somebody.
I learned something from you earlier. There's something else I would say, particularly to this target market, because a lot of the people are going to be young, and they're going to perhaps be suggesting a business in an area that is very new, and that they have an amazing understanding of and a creative aspect of looking at it, but that the rest of the world doesn't yet get. So in that situation, they can have a brilliant idea, they can actually know how to execute it, but they're just too early. And they run out of money. The support doesn't come in quite fast enough, and they end up looking back and saying, oh my God, I was so close. You've heard me talk about some of my launches before where I was, way ahead of the curve, but failed. So how do you manage to go into something to have the early mover advantage, the first mover advantage, but not to the point where the money simply isn't there? And there are a number of things that you can do, but one that I would strongly urge is, when you have that first idea or your 50th idea, you're very proud of it. You don't want to let it go. You don't want to share it with others. But very often, I think people don't realize the importance of cash, the importance of resource. And if you have to let go of 50% of your idea, 75% of your idea, and you're letting go to the right people. We look at Dragon's Den and some of the, very often some of the great examples, people are not choosing the highest amount of money that they're offered, but they're choosing the person that can add most strategically to it. So don't sit there with an idea in your drawer 2 years later that you still haven't done. Be prepared to let go some of the IP in return for resource.
Thank you for that. I think that's a very, very important insight for us. We haven't delved too deep this time on failure, which will come in future programs. Final takeaway, possibly?
Takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think especially for the startups sort of coming into this program, I think it's something to really take very seriously, and to I know Alexandra mentioned that a lot of the startups are already quite established, but just following on the theme of being a bit more realistic, and I think that one of the things that maybe is something that's worth developing or focusing on even within the program is just to have people know how to take a step back and re-strategize. It's okay to kind of go off the curve a little bit, but this is all about agility and trying to figure out the best decision to take with the limited resources that you have.
Final comment from you, ma'am?
A final comment would be to enjoy this ride, because it's a program which is out there. Of course, there's going to be a lot of learning which is attached to it, but also at the same time, you have to enjoy the whole ride. And then that's when you actually, get to the end, because the end goal is not to win a treasure out of this. The end goal is to actually reach somewhere way more learned than you were before you started the program.
As a conclusion, one of the things that I have is what I call the 60-40-20 rule. It's the average chairman of a company who's 60 years old, who's making all the strategic decisions with their board. The 40-year-olds are executing those decisions, and it's the 20-year-olds who are consuming. And then there's this disconnect between the two generations. And the advice that we give to the 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds is that the first one I say is reverse mentoring. Take a young mentor to learn. The second bit of advice that I provide, I suggest, is is to instead of going on a holiday and just lie on the beach, and actually go and take an art class, learn how to dance, learn a new language, get this side of your brain really, really working, because we now need to develop our right brain activity, intuition, and creativity, and imagination, and love, and those kinds of things are becoming more relevant, rather than the left side, which is going to computing and cognitive computing and artificial intelligence and so on. And the third one is, and that's more for us, is let's go and take a coding class, how to actually learn zeros and ones, because we talk about it. It is a new language, and we pretend we engage with it, but we don't actually dive into it. So let's take a 2-day coding program, and part of the reverse mentoring process we will include in this. A friend of mine, Firoz, they run a company called the Coding Circle, and I'm going to have this coding program for the more senior people in there. It's a 2-day, 2 afternoons at a weekend, to actually learn how zeros and ones work, and how it actually will change our lives. And I think those are the kinds of learning things that we need to do in the 60-40-20 rule. We're all learning, we're all engaging, and that's the essence of this. And have young people doing it. And where is my young person? I don't know. She's disappeared. She's too shy. But it's that raw, innocent energy that we're pulling all together. So wonderful to have you, Neil, Ori, Linda, and Samar. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you. And we'll enjoy this journey together.